So FundReady has been 10 years in the making. I didn't know that 10 years ago, but I know that now. You see, 10 years ago, I had a dream to become an angel investor. And I didn't know how I was going to do it because I didn't have angel investor kind of money. So I asked myself, what does it take to become an angel investor? How am I going to do this? I didn't get an answer in the moment, but I started to get some insight from within around what I needed to do. And what I needed to do was change my mindset. I didn't know that then, but I would soon discover that that is what was happening. My name is Stephanie. I am the founder of FundReady, and this is sort of a bridge between a founder story and your story. So, back in 2015, I'll go back a little further, say 2014. That was my first exit from corporate America. It wasn't the only or the last, right? It wasn't the only corporate experience or role I would fill, but it was my resignation from the longest 12-year role within a major corporation. And I had been there in the capacity of a data analyst, contract administrator, business analyst, and so on, project manager, and things of that nature. And so, but at the time, I had already been doing that kind of work for probably 17 years, and I was ready for a new experience. I wanted to do something in the world that would create impact. I knew that I could create maximum impact somewhere just by nature of who I am and what I love to do. And so, 2015, I started this journey. And it was that time when I wrote a book. The book is called Reboot. It's really called Help, I Need a Reboot. This program is not working. Now, I didn't have the title for the book when I was writing it, but writing the book was the answer to the question, how do I do it? How do I create maximum impact in the world? And that was the beginning of this 10-year journey. So around that time, I also started a home-based handmade skincare business that was called Body Truth. That was in 2015 actually. It came at the tail end of some other, homesteading kind of things that I jumped into because that's just what I like to do, which is all the way on the other side of, the left brain work that I've been so good at. I do both. So, 2019, right before COVID, I opened a retail space. Embedded in that was my manufacturing kitchen, my soap kitchen. Well, a month or two after my grand opening, we started this world shutdown. So imagine doing something completely new. Just imagine coming on the tail end of what you thought was overcoming fears and breaking barriers, only to be met immediately with brute force, with a challenge like no other. That's what COVID brought. That was another opening for FundReady because I learned how to write grants in that space of time. I learned how to fill a need in the community because by nature of being a skincare business, I was asked by the county to create hand sanitizer, of which I did. But that created major pivoting, like I call it rapid response because that's what it was. And when all was said and done from that entire experience, I was completely burned out because it didn't start the way that I thought it would, right? Taking my handmade business, my home-based handmade soap business and moving it into a storefront, thinking that I was going to still be able to bring that that creative vibe a in a fun way. It didn't work that way, not at all. It was a learning experience, and it wasn't fun. It was hard work. It was so hard, but it was what happened is I let my passion become a work, and that was not what I intended. My something that I love to do became something I was enslaved to. And it's because honestly, I didn't set systems in place. But I didn't expect everything to explode as soon as the doors opened. So there it is. That's the story behind that. I closed that business. And out of that, I started to think, okay, what do I do now? How do I recover from that experience, continue moving forward and doing what I love, but also continue to create maximum impact in the community? And Body Truth did. So that's when I started writing grants. I thought, well, the next best thing is to become a grant writer to support organizations that are already having impact in the community. That would make sense, right? That was a viable plan. When I stepped into grant writing, being the systems oriented problem solver that I am, I started looking at the data. I started discovering that organizations led by people in the BIPOC community, by people who look like me, I'll just say it, were the ones getting the least funding. And there were lots of reports that talk about, I've written some actually in out here on my LinkedIn newsletter, and just uncovering the disparities between in philanthropy for Black led and Black female led organizations. So that's what I had before me. That was the problem that I saw. But the scope and the magnitude of the problem was much deeper than that. Again, coming from systems and analytics, analyzing business, analyzing performance, analyzing data, analyzing processes, all of it, people, processes, and technology. That's the world I came from. I knew that there was a deeper story, but it gets deeper than that. I started uncovering some truths and I decided, well, I don't want to be a grant writer. I want to solve the systems problem. I want to solve the capacity problems for nonprofits because I saw the capacity gap that existed and I saw why it existed, but I dug deeper in my own experience because I was being the person representing the problem. I know that sounds weird, but it's the way I solve problems. I get into the container of the problem to identify what's really in there, and then I discover a solution or I create a solution. I started to see why nonprofits are so necessary in our communities. Where did we drop the ball as a society that required us to have the need for nonprofits? Nonprofits fill amazing services or supply amazing services and programs and economic mobility to the community. That is no doubt. But I wanted to understand how is it that we have so many nonprofits? We have a need for the nonprofits, but then we have this huge funding gap, especially in communities of color. And I started to uncover the systemic issues that have affected communities. I'll say affected families, which make up communities, which has caused the problem, which has called for the solution. And a nonprofit filling the gap for families and communities is a solution, but not if it's underfunded, not if that nonprofit doesn't have the capacity to meet the need, right? So then I took it a little deeper. Well, from there, I forgot a few layers in here. I wrote Reboot back in 2016, and that was to increase my own capacity, my capacity to grow beyond my limitations, grow beyond my beliefs, to root out old beliefs and install new beliefs. That was back then. That moved me forward. So when I began to dig deeper into what's happening in our communities with nonprofits and the gap that exists between what the government had been providing in terms of support for families that needed the extra support, the extra lift. What I discovered, I'll tell you about that in a second. After I dug into these deeper layers and I saw some of the generational aspects and the structure of families, what has happened to the families that have caused the breakdowns, which have caused the need for nonprofits to step in and support. And I wrote a book, and it's called Covenant Breaking Prayers, that is on Amazon. And that book addresses the agreements that we have made as a society with lack, with poverty, with scarcity. That's another conversation, but it's important because it flows with what we're talking about here. I wrote that book last year, and then out of that experience of writing, because when you're writing, there's an evolution and there's revelation. There's wisdom that comes to the surface to be looked at, to be analyzed. When you pull all the parts into scope, into view, it's not just one, it's not a one-dimensional problem. When we look at what's happening with nonprofits, when we look at the funding or the lack thereof, when we look at the capacity or the lack thereof, when we look at all of the problems that surround us in this sector and as it relates to sufficient sustainable funding, it is not a one-dimensional situation. So from those experiences, I went back to Reboot because I saw how those 5 pillars of transformation that I wrote for an individual needed to be woven into a new piece of work for organizations, and that is called Reboot, Organizational Transformation for Nonprofits. So after that, that's when I wrote Covenant Breaking Prayers. That was next. And then after that, I started writing 2 more books. So I'm writing them now, but I've been so busy building FundReady. Those books aren't done. But this FundReady journey parallels those books. One of the books is called Dethroning Fatherlessness, How the System Replaced God with Government. Now I want you to let that sit for a second, because that is actually the setup to the need for nonprofits to step in and support families in our communities. I'm writing that, like I said, parallel to FundReady because they coincide. It is a revelatory experience. Building FundReady has been extremely revelatory. It's not just bringing a solution, it's a platform that I'm building, a SaaS product, but it's more than that. It's an ecosystem. It is a holistic framework for funding your mission, for funding your vision. That's what it is. And I wanted to be able to share all of that because sometimes we are too embedded in the one or singular dimensionality of a problem. And we think that we can solve a problem with a singular solution, and that is not the case. We think that lack of funding is just because maybe there's no tools, or we don't have templates, or we haven't been taught how to apply for grants. But the grant application, the proposal itself, is evidence of the infrastructure. It's evidence of your journey as an organization, your journey to fundability, your belief in your vision, your belief in your mission. Your proposal stems from what you've already done, the work that you've already done. It's not something that you do. It's just the capstone. So in this video, I would say is a little bit about the founder story, my story. It is about what I've been developing and from where. FundReady was supposed to be pitched for investment. That's where I started because it was a grand left brain idea. It still is. However, there was all of these underlying other dimensions of the problem that I began to see and to weave together, and that changed the scope of how this business would be launched, deployed, rolled out, pitched, moved, because I thought I was going to hire a team of engineers, programmers, developers to develop this software for me. And I wondered, how am I going to install all of this knowledge? I'm going to have to gather it from someplace. Well, I used to be a database developer, so I know how to architect data. I know how to architect a database. That was not the problem. I just thought, well, I don't know the new programming language because I haven't done it in a while. But that's easy, right? It was all of the infrastructure for FundReady. It was the wisdom and the knowledge. It was the insights that don't come from developers. It comes from the founder. It comes from that which I've excavated to make FundReady ready, if that makes sense. And so what I realized is that I would be building FundReady from the ground up. Now, when I planned it, I didn't know that. I know that now because that's what I've been doing for the last 6 months without realizing it. I never really came up for air. I'd been in the weeds, building day after day after day around the clock with all of these things that I just mentioned to you. I'm still writing the books. I only gave you the title of one upcoming book, but there are two, and they are also parallel. They all come together to solve the problems in our communities, but including the one around funding and capacity. So when you think about your organization, so I'm talking to you founders, executive directors, leadership teams of organizations, I want you to consider that one, it is so important that you are operating from your vision, the vision that you held when you put your organization in motion. It is important that you don't lose sight of your mission because those two are going to lay the groundwork, become the blueprint, and the roadmap for everything that you do from an operating standpoint. From the people that you hire to the processes you map out and the technology you install, they all must align with the greater vision. If the things that you are doing do not align with your vision, do not fulfill the mission, it's time to scrap them. Yes, that was not the intent of this video, but you know what? One of those people, I have so much in my head. Sometimes I just need to bring it forward in the moment because I might forget about it. So I just wanted to share the personal backstory. And this is the roadmap. When you're building a SaaS product, there's a roadmap. This is the roadmap. And I'm continuing to build and I'm continuing to grow. I'm continuing to iterate as a person. That's what we do when we develop software. We continue to learn and grow and iterate. That's implement what we've learned to build a better product, to build a better human, to build a better organization. So hopefully I didn't forget anything that I really wanted to be here in this video, in this conversation. But thank you for being here. My name is Stephanie. I'm the founder of FundReady, and I will see you in the next video. If you are a founder, if you are an executive director, if you are a leadership team, a board member, and this resonated with you, you want to maximize impact. You want to expand your fundability. Maybe you want to go after grants that you thought you didn't qualify before. Maybe you already tried to apply for grants and your proposals were rejected. Whatever the case is, FundReady can help. Go to the website, fundready.io. There's tools there that can assist you in your funding journey. I have a grant readiness assessment. There's a leader assessment. You'll find them on the website. Those are free. And then there are other tools and services that will support you. It's not do it for you, and it's not you get it and go off and do it alone. I walk with you in your funding journey. I walk with you in your capacity building. That's how this works. So visit the website, get familiar with the tools and the services that are available. Go to the contact page and reach out. Let me know how I can serve you. My name is Stephanie. I'm the founder of FundReady. Thank you for being here.